Assalamualaikum candidates. This video is about March 2023 variant 4.2 question 4 essay. It's a macroeconomics question. Expenditure reducing policies will reduce a balance of payment deficit but will also cause significant unemployment. So as you are aware, there are 14 marks for knowledge, understanding and analysis and 6 marks for evaluation. So to demonstrate knowledge understanding, we must share our understanding of 3 concepts used in this question with the examiner. One is balance of payment deficit, the other one is unemployment, and the third is expenditures reducing policies. So first paragraph tells you about balance of payment deficit. Balance of payment is a systematic record of all transactions of a country with the rest of the world, and a deficit of balance of payment means that the inflows fall short of outflows. Now what are the inflows? 4 inflows are in the current account and the 5th one is the financial or capital account. The 4 inflows of current account are inflows when we sell exports of goods, exports of services, bring another type of inflow, primary income and secondary income. Whereas in financial account, investments and loans are recorded. So if the inflows of exports, incomes and investments and borrowings fall short of outflows for imports, incomes sent abroad and repayment of foreign loans, or if we invest outside our country, our currency will also outflow. So if these inflows, combine inflows of 6 things: exports of goods, exports of services, primary income, secondary income, investment and borrowing. If the combined inflow of these 6 fall short of the combined outflow of 6 things, which are import of goods, import of services, income sent abroad, transfer payment sent abroad, repayment of loans and our investments in other countries, so in that case there will be a deficit of balance of payment. Unemployment is the number of people who are willing and able to work but they are unable to find a job. That is second paragraph. The third paragraph, expenditure reducing strategies, also known as deflationary or contractionary policies. These policies aim to reduce aggregate demand. You remember that there is another name of aggregate demand in our economics, and that is aggregate expenditures. So expenditure reducing strategies means strategies which aim to reduce aggregate demand, and the purpose is to achieve macroeconomic stability. There could be fiscal tools, there could be monetary tools for expenditure reducing strategies. The monetary tool is raising interest rates. If you raise interest rates, that is the expenditure reducing tool. Now how does an increase in interest rate reduce expenditures? Now that's a very famous and favorite topic of the examiners. So higher interest rates raise the cost of borrowing, they also raise the reward for saving, they prompt consumers to save more and consume less. And that's very important that you highlight that the consumption of every type of good does not fall. Consumption of non-essential high price items particularly falls. That when interest rates go up, people do not really lower the consumption of probably onion, the grocery, but they'll do decrease the consumption of buying automobiles, jewelry, expensive holidays, big houses. In most of the countries, people buy houses through mortgage. So when interest rates go up, demand for mortgage financing reduces. Since consumption is a part of AD, higher interest rates reduces consumption and hence AD falls. Higher interest rates also raise the opportunity cost of investments, and that leads to lower investment and lower AD. So when AD falls, people buy lesser domestic goods and they also buy lesser imported goods. So when interest rates rise, people spend less on domestically produced goods and they also spend less on imports. Now that is expenditure reducing aspect of this strategy. However, there is a expenditure switching aspect as well of these deflationary tools, and that is explained in next paragraph. The reduced AD may help control demand, pull inflation. Prices go down. When prices go down, local goods seem relatively cheaper. That prompts consumers to switch expenditure from seemingly expensive imports to relatively cheaper import. Now that is expenditure switching. Now the question is about expenditure reducing, but what we are saying here that when expenditures fall because of probably an increase in interest rate, people save more, spend less both on locally made goods as well as on imports. But high interest rates also help control demand pull inflation, prices are decreased, and that means people may buy more of local goods, and that is expenditure switching. There is a downside of raising interest rates in the economy, which has flexible exchange rate. Now what happens? When interest rates are risen, that attracts hard money inflows. Hard money inflows rise because people put their money in those currencies which offer them a higher interest rate. That means demand for our currency goes up. Demand for national currency goes up. And this means that exchange rate would go up. So when exchange rate would go up, imports would become cheaper. And what was the purpose of raising interest rate? Purpose of the higher interest rate was to overcome a deficit of balance of payment, and that was meant to decrease imports. But in the process of raising interest rate, in the case of a flexible exchange rate, our exchange rate may go up, and that may make imports cheaper. And when imports become cheaper, people may be tempted to buy more imports. And this tool of raising interest rate may not be able to give us the desired result of decreasing imports and decreasing a balance of payment deficit. Another expenditure switching tool is contractionary fiscal policy. Contractionary fiscal policy is another tool, and that involves either government expenditure are reduced or income taxes are raised. When income taxes are raised, people's disposable income falls and they lower their spending both on locally made goods as well as in imports, and that again is meant to decrease the deficit on balance of payment. However, these contractionary tools, all of them, three contractionary tools we have studied, one monetary and two fiscal. High interest rates, monetary tool. Lower government spending, fiscal tool. Higher income taxes, fiscal tool. Now all these three tools will have a drawback, and that is that they withdraw and reduce aggregate demand of locally made goods. It may be beneficial for economies operating above full employment and they have a positive output gap. That economy may be experiencing demand pull inflation. In this case, a withdrawal of aggregate demand may help control demand pull inflation. We can make two diagrams. One, ADS diagram. Along x-axis, real GDP. Along y-axis, price level. AS is vertical line. Economy was operating at YF. Aggregate demand was AD naught. Price level was P naught. Now, in this case, if contraction tools are used, expenditure reducing strategies are used, they may not create unemployment, as the fall in AD will only control the price level and there may not be any impact on unemployment. So the question says, will the policies of expenditure reducing lead to unemployment? So we may say these policies will not lead to unemployment. In an economy that has full employment, in that economy, only impact of fall in AD and only impact of expenditure decreasing strategies would be a controlled demand pull inflation. The other diagram we can make is income expenditure model. 45-degree line, expenditure function initial E naught, phi E, and over here is GDP. It's not real GDP. Remember, when you draw an ADS curve, which is shown on your left side of the screen, we show real GDP on x-axis, but on income expenditure model, which is shown on the right side of your screen, we show nominal or money GDP. The initial income was Y naught, and we assume it was above full employment, and it was a positive output gap. When economy produces an output above full employment, it's a positive output gap. Decrease in expenditures, shifts expenditure function downward, lower output from Y0 to YF. Now in this case again, this expenditure reducing strategy would be useful for the domestic economy. It will not create unemployment. It will only help bridge the positive output gap. It will only help bridge the inflationary gap. Inflation will be controlled. There won't be any increase in unemployment. However, for economies which are operating below full employment and which have a negative output gap, they may suffer because of expenditure reducing strategies. And we may again can make two diagrams. ADS, real GDP, price level. Now in this case, we are showing an upward rising AS curve. And AD, initial income was Y0 and price level was P0. If the use of expenditure reducing strategies shifts AD to the left, it may help control prices, but it may also lower real GDP, and that lower GDP would mean high demand deficient unemployment. So yes, expenditure reducing strategies may trigger unemployment. Another way of showing this is through income expenditure model. Again, GDP or income, expenditures on y-axis, 45-degree line, initial expenditures E0, initial income was probably as full employment by F. A fall in expenditures shifts expenditure function downward, and that creates a negative output gap. A negative output gap is created. Now this is a negative output gap, and that means economy may now experience unemployment. So remember, expenditure reducing strategies are useful for economies which experience inflation, which operate above full employment, as these policies will help control inflation and will help decrease positive output gap. However, for economies operating below full employment, expenditure reducing strategies may trigger unemployment, and they may create deflationary gap, they may create negative output gap. So the impact of expenditure switching strategies on unemployment not only depends on the current state of the economy, but also on the type of unemployment the country is experiencing. The use of expenditure reducing strategies may increase demand deficient unemployment or cyclical unemployment. Both these types of unemployment are because of the lack of aggregate demand, and since expenditure reducing strategies aim to reduce demand, the unemployment that is created because of this is demand deficient or cyclical unemployment. However, the impact on other types of unemployment, such as structural unemployment, may be uncertain. However, if government lowers spending on education and training, that may also lead to structural unemployment. So this is what we are going to conclude now. This essay, expenditure reducing strategies help stabilize price level, they help demand for imports to fall, and they help demand for local goods to rise in case local goods become more price competitive. However, expenditure reducing strategies may trigger unemployment and recession in the economy. The impact of expenditure reducing strategies on unemployment depends on the current state of the economy. It's more likely that expenditure reducing strategies will lead to rising unemployment in economies which already experience unemployment and which operate below full employment. However, the negative effect of expenditure reducing strategies would be less severe in economies which operate above full employment and which experience inflation. This concludes my discussion on this essay.